There we go. All right, folks, welcome back. We are going to finish up Sir Gawain the Green Knight tonight, and we're going to make that transition, that shift that I promised that we would do yesterday. So we were examining the roles of women and the way women are kind of marginalized in the text. But now what we're really going to get to is we're going to get to the heart of the poem, what the Christian poet is trying to say to us, the message that is trying to be communicated. So the key lines of the poem come on page 60, and we're going to talk about this at another point. We're going to read the whole speech given by Bergerac / the Green Knight in just a moment. But he says to Sir Gawain at this point, but that you loved your own life, the less than to blame. So I don't know if you guys remember, but yesterday, at the end of class, what we were talking about is that self-preservation was the ultimate private desire. Remember, it was the private desire that enfolds all other desires, the umbrella desire, essentially, the comprehensive desire. And so it seems like the whole poem up to this point is moving us to feel that self-preservation is almost like the unpardonable sin, right? That you're not supposed to do that, and that's the one thing that Sir Gawain did that was so wrong. It might have even been better if he had given in to sexual temptation as opposed to choosing to save himself at the cost of the kingdom and the kingdom's reputation, okay? Because he chooses to keep this magic girdle, this magic token, and not reveal it to his host, and that was a really, really bad thing. But then we have these words of kind of exoneration, these words of forgiveness on the part of the Green Knight, and it completely shifts the message in some ways of the poem. So let's talk about two things in particular that the Green Knight's quote here seems to bear out. The first one is that he seems to be acknowledging here for the reader and for Sir Gawain that life itself is inherently good. So he's acknowledging the inherent goodness of life. Now here's what this means. I think most of us would agree with this. Would you agree that if somebody, let's say, is struggling with depression that you know about and is tempted to take their own life, that you would argue that they should not do that because life itself is a gift given to us by the Creator, and there's a lot of really good things about being alive, even though there's a lot of sin, suffering, and bad stuff that happens too. Would we agree? Right? That life is good? So we don't want to dismiss our lives lightly. That's one of the first things that the poem is trying to teach us. That's what the Christian poet is trying to say. The fact that he instinctively wanted to guard his own life was not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, which seems to go against the code in some ways of chivalry. Secondly, Sir Bergerac, Lord Bergerac, is approving here Sir Gawain's instinctive desire to live, and he's essentially implicitly saying that self-preservation, unlike what the poem seems to be saying, is not actually an evil. Okay? Self-preservation is not an evil. Sir Gawain's instinctive desire to live is like giving a thumbs up, giving several thumbs up, right? He's like, go for it. You want to live? That's totally fine. It's kind of like, I remember when I was younger, in elementary school, I don't know if you guys remember being on the back of the bus going to elementary school, and there was like a game. I played fast and loose with the word game. It wasn't really a game because nobody really wins this game. But there was a trick that people play on you if they want to bully you, and it's called 2 for flinching. Do you guys remember that game? 2 for flinching? Oh man, I hate that game. I would come back so many afternoons black and blue on my upper arm because I had lost the game 2 for flinching. Who wants to tell us what happens in the game 2 for flinching? Do you remember? You're on the back of the bus. Yeah, John.
Like, they would tend to punch you, and then if you flinch, they actually can't punch you.
Isn't that a great game, guys? So they come towards you, pretending to punch you, right? They come really close to punching you, and then if you flinch, they actually get to punch you, not once, but twice. It's like they're punishing you for having a parasympathetic nervous system, right? And then it's like, yeah, I'm a human, so therefore I flinch. Same thing, guys, with Sir Gawain. Remember when the Green Knight's got the axe, and he's about to come down first time? Sir Gawain flinches, the Green Knight starts mocking him and laughing. He's like, haha, you flinched. Sir Gawain's like, I've got a parasympathetic nervous system, right? It's the 2 for flinching game all over again. Comes down a second time, he flinches, mocks him. Third time, what happens with the axe? Do you remember? Just gives him a tiny little nick on the neck as a reminder, a memento, that you weren't exactly perfect, Sir Gawain, but I'm not going to chop your head off. I'm not going to kill you for it because you're a human being, right? And you're only human, and that's an okay thing. That's authorized by the Green Knight and by the creator of the poem. Now, there are some references throughout the poem, even before we get to this final testing scene at the Green Chapel, and there are references to other embodied creatures. There are birds, there are deer, there are, the boar, the fox, all these other embodied creatures who are indirectly preparing for the final testing of Sir Gawain. Marie Boroff, who was one of the translators of Sir Gawain, who actually translated this edition that you guys read, she says this, and I think it's pretty powerful. She says, "We witness throughout the poem, and much of the time experience vicariously, desperate maneuvers on the part of these living creatures who do not want to die." Okay, I'll say that again. She says, "We witness as readers, and much of the time experience vicariously, these desperate maneuvers on the part of living creatures who simply don't want to die." Right? Because they're human, they're not human, right? They're animals, and yet they instinctively avoid pain, they avoid death, they avoid suffering, because they don't want to have to deal with it. Sir Gawain is in that category. She goes on to say, "An embodied mortal creature is by definition made of vulnerable flesh and blood. The poem contains these series of references to bleeding to associate the Green Knight with Sir Gawain, and less conspicuously, to associate both of them with all these animals throughout." So let's look at a couple of these. You guys brought the text with you, right? Everyone brought the text? All right, I need somebody to read for me on page 21. Who wants to read on page 21? I thought Maddie said we wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. Oh, happy, good, 21. All right, who wants to read on page 22, guys? These are short passages. 22. All right, thanks, Devin. Next one will be page, bottom of 31, top of 32. These aren't long passages, guys. Someone want to read that one? All right, thanks, Michelle. Good. All right, so the first one was Abigail, right? If you can read for us on page 21, it is the first description we get of Sir Gawain when he leaves. And remember, he's leaving right around the time of the New Year. So it's in England. It's going to be pretty cold, right? The weather's going to be pretty bad. And because he's a knight, what do we use? What phrase do we usually use after knight when we're talking about a medieval poem? He's a knight in shining armor, and it becomes not so shining very shortly afterwards because of the weather. So Abigail, read for us on 21, and it starts on line 726 towards the bottom. And if the wars were unwelcome.
And if the wars were unwelcome, the winter was worse, when the cold clear rains rushed from the clouds and froze before they could fall to the frosty earth. Near slain by the sleet, he sleeps in his irons, more nights than enough, among naked rocks, where clattering from the crest the cold stream ran, and hung in hard icicles high overhead.
All right, guys, you know how language can always express conditions pretty well? Could you almost feel how cold it is just from the language being used here? So when you guys go to sleep at night, you've got climate control, you've got air conditioning, you've got heat, right? He is sleeping in chainmail, and it says that he is sleeping among naked rocks, hard rocks, so he doesn't have his Sealy Posturepedic, he doesn't have his little comfort pillow or anything like that. It says, clattering from the crest, the cold stream ran and hung in hard icicles high overhead. This is not a comfortable way to live life. He's probably counting the hours, like the psalmist says, like the watchman watches for the dawn, waiting until it's time so he can actually get up again and stretch his limbs, because he's freezing to death in this chainmail. Can I tell you a brief story about this? Real brief story? All right. So what happened was, when I was in the military in ROTC, I did ROTC in college. Of course, it was out of Wheaton. So it's near Chicago, windy city, very cold. It was cold basically 10 months out of the year. And this one particular year, basically every semester, one weekend a semester, we would have to go on something called a field training exercise, an FTX. And this particular field training exercise was at a place called Joliet, Illinois. Do you guys know where Joliet is? Anyone? Anyone's from the Illinois area? Taylor, you know what I'm talking about? All right. Am I going to step on your toes if I say Joliet wasn't that great a place? Is that okay?
No, I don't live there.
Okay. It's really flat. Somehow it smells like burning tires all the time. Gray sky. It was in November, guys. Early November, we go out for the weekend and we're camping out, right, out there. So it was ROTC, right? It was college ROTC, so we didn't really have the state-of-the-art equipment that people in active duty military would have. We basically, for our sleeping bags, have canvas sacks stuffed with cotton. That's basically what we had for sleeping bags. We would have a sleeping mat, like a hard sleeping mat that we could bring with us to sort of separate the sleeping bags from the ground. And then our tents were not like Sir Edmund Hillary tents that you could, like go and ascend Mount Everest with or whatever. They were basically two, almost from the 1950s or something, these two canvas strips that you would buckle together or button together. And then you got these two sticks that would serve as posts. And there was like a pup tent, right? And you'd be sleeping on the ground. And you'd be sleeping in this pup tent with another guy who would be your battle buddy. So this is my senior year, I remember. Senior year at Wheaton. It was November at Joliet. We spent the weekend. It was a very cold weekend. And I remember this particular night very, very well because I felt like Sir Gawain here. There was not much sleep for me or Pete. In fact, I couldn't feel my left arm throughout most of the night. Pete couldn't feel one leg. And so we both got about 20 minutes each of sleep. we woke up in the morning, didn't really sleep, right? Woke up, saw the condensation from our breath had created mini icicles on the top of this pup tent. Got up, wanted to get some coffee in our little canteen cup because we were just so cold, right? So we get some warm hot coffee, and our lieutenant colonel, the professor of military science, he's talking with us, and he says, guys, it was almost historically cold last night. We're like, you think? He's like, but we didn't say it that way because we didn't want to be disrespectful. But we were like, how cold was it, sir? And he said, well, the thermometer read 17 below zero at one point. And we were in this just, crappy canvas sacks, with cotton and stuff. And he was like, yeah, I'm thinking about maybe cutting the FTX short this weekend because I'm really worried about, weather-related injuries, cold weather-related injuries. And I'm like, man, I'm surprised someone didn't get frostbite. He's like, under my watch, nobody gets frostbite. I'm like, frostnip, not frostbite. Because you're not allowed to have your soldiers get frostbite, apparently. So anyway, that I feel for Sir Gawain. How many of you guys have ever slept outside or camped outside when it was kind of cold?
Oh, yeah.
Any in 17 below zero weather in Joliet? Have you, Alex? Yeah. Minnesota, okay, now you make me look bad. Yeah. Did you have the canvas sacks too?
We hauled out a giant pile of snow.
Oh.
It was actually pretty warm in. But
yeah, man, you're tough. All right. So anyway, it sucked for me. Didn't necessarily suck for Alex. That's fine. So that's the first scene, right? Where Sir Gawain is literally wanting to die because he's sleeping in the chainmail. Who has page 22? Devin, you got that one? All right. This is really the next page, guys. This is the very next page. It's a description of birds that we get. All right. So read for us just 2 lines, Devin. Lines 746 and 747.
With many birds unblithe upon bare twigs, they peep most piteously. Piteously.
Yeah.
For pain of the cold.
All right, you see this, guys? There's a clear link between Sir Gawain sleeping in his chainmail with the icicles and the hard rock and these birds, these poor birds, that it says they were unblithe, meaning unhappy, and they peeped most piteously for pain of the cold. So you got to imagine these little finches or sparrows trying very hard to sort of, how birds do, where they bring their wings up kind of to keep warm, and they're peeping most piteously for pain of the cold. So I have this mental image in my mind of these birds on the branches just going like, trying to stay very, I don't know why that happened. And I'm glad the camera didn't catch it. Anyway, it's very, very scary. It's very, very threatening. These birds might fall off the branches and die in the middle of the night, and they hate the cold. Isn't that sad? Just like Sir Gawain hates the cold. All right, let's have another scene. Who had the next one, guys? All right, Michelle, read for us the description of the deer being hunted by Bertilac at the bottom of page 31. And it starts on line 1150, and then I'm going to tell you to jump to the bottom of the page. So at the clamor of the quest. Got that?
At the clamor of the quest, the quarry trembled. Deer dashed through the dale, dazed with dread.
And then jump down to 1160.
Then you were aware, as they went, of the whistling of arrows. At each bent under boughs, the bright shafts flew, that tore the tawny hide with their tapered heads. Ah, they bray and they bleed on banks that die.
All right, that's what deer do when you hunt them, right? First of all, they're terrified. Then they bray, that is, they cry out in pain, and then they bleed, and on banks, they die. That's what happens if you get hunted, if you're a deer, for anyone who's ever hunted a deer before. So all these clues are implicitly preparing us for this final sequence where Sir Gawain has to face up to his own mortality, he has to face up to his own death, and he does not want to die, just like the deer, just like the birds, just like he himself did not want to die of exposure when he was in his chainmail trying to make it to the Green Chapel. You guys got that? All right, so let's bring up what we just talked about here. We had in the armor and the birds, we had the frightened deer, and then finally we have Sir Gawain's lament on page 58. I'm going to read this one, and then I'm going to read a passage from Job over there. So page 58, again, it's the 2 for flinching game, right? The Green Knight basically comes down at him, mocks him 2 times for flinching, and then finally he says, I believe very movingly, middle of the page, said Gawain, strike once more, I shall neither flinch nor flee, but if my head falls to the floor, there is no mending me. He says, I recognize, Green Knight, that you are like some kind of jolly green giant supernatural entity, some kind of vegetative deity, who every time your head gets chopped off, you can just pick it up and it grows back on. But I'm not a freaking bush or a tree. I'm a human being, and the minute you chop my head off, guess what happens? I die. Because people need their heads, right? They need that, and he says there is no mending. What this reminds me of, a little bit, is the words of Cassandra, way back at the beginning of the semester when we were talking about Agamemnon, where she says, again, very poignantly, man's lifeblood is dark and mortal, once it wets the ground, what song can sing it back? That's what Sir Gawain is saying to the Green Knight here, which reminds me of Job's words capturing the frailty of the human condition in Job 7 and Job 14. I'll just read it for you guys. He says to the reader, as a cloud vanishes and is gone, so he who goes down to the grave does not return. He will never come to his house again. His place will know him no more. At least there's hope for a tree or a green knight. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump die in the soil, yet at the scent of water it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. But man dies and is laid low. He breathes his last and is no more. As water disappears from the sea, or a riverbed becomes parched and dry, so man lies down and does not rise. Till the heavens are no more, men will not awake or be roused from their sleep. So there's Job's lament, which is very, very similar to Sir Gawain's lament here. He says, I don't know what I'm going to do if you kill me, because I can't come back again. I can't come back to life again. But I'm going to stand here and take it, because a man pays what a man owes, right? And so I have promised to do this, so the third time, I'm not going to flinch. You can chop off my head, but I'm going to hate it, and I'm going to die, and I don't want to die. You guys get that? Okay, so let's keep moving on, guys. We are doing well. How does our perception and Sir Gawain's of the Green Knight change from the beginning to the end of the story? Now, what I want to do here is, first of all, I want to come to the left side of the camera so I can move a little bit. I'm going to come under it. And I'm going to talk to you guys. All right. So here's the deal, guys. How many of you, and you guys are still in the game here, all right? How many of you have ever gone back to a place where you grew up and it's like a different place now? I mean, you live now in a different place than the place where you grew up. Have you guys ever had that experience before? What do we notice about the house where we lived in, the playground we used to play in, the fields we used to frolic in? Danny?
It's smaller than you remember it.
How many of you guys have had that experience where it feels a ton smaller, right? For me, I remember growing up elementary school. This is up in Northern Virginia in the Fairfax area. Yeah. But I mean, the lawn in our backyard, when I went back to it, it was like a postage stamp. But when I was like in elementary school, 4th grade, we would play these huge, awesome games of like tackle football when my parents weren't looking, my mom wasn't looking. And it was huge. It was like, it went way, way off into the distance, it felt like. But then I get there again when I'm older and I'm like, man, this is so small. You guys have had that experience before, right? How many of you have had an equal experience of a change in perception in the way you viewed your parents from when you were really little to the way you view them now? Have you guys ever had that experience? All right. What is different from the way you view your parents now versus the way you viewed them, let's say, when you were 2 years old or 3 years old? What changes have taken place? Alex?
You see some of the chinks in their armor.
Okay, you start to see, I like the medieval reference there. You start to see some of the chinks in their armor. Okay, keep talking, guys. What changes do we start to see or experience? Maddie?
See yourself as more similar to them.
Yes. How many of you have ever seen yourself a little bit more similar to your parents than you were when you were a lot younger? Good. Anything else? Other things that are happening? Savannah?
You might actually be right.
Yes. Your parents might actually be right. God forbid. You thought they were always wrong.
Like me, I'm right. They might be wrong.
Oh, that's true too. That is true too. How many of you have ever had that experience where you recognize that your parents, who you thought were infallible like the Pope, right, are actually maybe wrong sometimes. And they were basically just trying to get by sometimes, right, in order to discipline you or in order to teach you certain things. Maybe they didn't have all the answers because maybe they're not God. Is that true? Yeah, okay. Any other changes, guys, that we've experienced with our parents in particular? Cassie?
Like as you get older, you see the sacrifices they make.
Yeah.
You see the difference.
So you see the Savannah side of things, but you also see the Cassie side of things, that they made a great deal of sacrifices that maybe you were blind to when you were younger, and now you appreciate that a little bit more. Michelle?
Even physically, like my dad was 6'3", so I like looked up to him.
Yes.
physically, And now I'm
Yes.
maybe like a foot.
How many of you, your parents were your first superheroes, right? You're like, they're going to live forever. They can do anything. They can do no wrong. And it's kind of poignant and sad the older you get, because you start to see wrinkles. You start to see age marks. You start to see maybe they forget their keys somewhere and you're like, uh-oh, is this early dementia? What's happening right now, right? You start to worry about that a little bit, and you recognize this person is not immortal. This person is not going to live forever. I need to take care of this person, right? I need to love this person and show the person that I love them now, because they might not be around forever. You guys got that? The same kind of thing is happening, I would argue, in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And we're going to see this as it takes place through a series of passages, from the beginning of the poem to the end of the poem. So I'm going to need some more readers who haven't read yet tonight. Can I get someone to read for me on page 7? Someone want to read on page 7? Yes, Ashley. Guys, hurry up or we're going to be here till midnight. All right, 7. Who wants to read page 20? All right, thanks, Ian. Who wants to read page 56? Philip, thanks, bud. Seth, you want to read page 60? And then one more. One more. You guys are feeling the pressure, aren't you? Because I'm standing right here. Anyone? Anyone? Stop it. Stop it. All right, guys, I need one more. All right, thanks, Josh. 57. All right, Josh? Okay. So here we go, guys. 7, 20, 56, 60, 57. I'm going back under the camera. All right. Who had the first one? All right, Ashley. The first description we get of the Green Knight. Remember how King Arthur is looking for some kind of magical, wondrous story to hear before he'll eat anything? Okay? We have the first appearance of the Green Knight, and it's almost like your wish is my command. He basically comes in response to what Arthur desires. And just read for us that bob and wheel, actually on page 7, starting with line 147. Great wonder. See what that is for the top of the page?
Great wonder grew in hall, at his view was strange to see, for man and gear and all, for green as green could be.
All right, guys, in these 4 lines that Ashley just read us, what can we say definitively about the Green Knight? What seems very strange and unusual about it, based on the words? Okay, he is green all over, and it says man and gear and all were green as green can be. So that means his horse, his noble steed, is green with like red eyes, kind of supernatural, kind of scary. What person is green, right? What human being is green? This is an indication that this guy is not even really human. Does that make sense? Green as green can be. Man, gear, and all. It isn't just that he was wearing green armor. It's that his face was green, his beard was green, his horse was green. This is a terrifying spectacle. What we see here, as you see up on the screen, you're going to see a process of diminishment and demystification, kind of like we see with our own parents, kind of like we see when we become adults and grow up. So at the start, he's green all over. He's like the Jolly Green Giant. He is supernatural. He's a larger-than-life being. He is a figure of wonder, awe, and reverence, kind of the way we see our parents when we are born and, when we're really little, when we're looking up to our parents. All right, next one, page 20. You had 20?
I did.
All right, Ian. Read for us starting on line 677. And guys, as you're doing the reading, kind of project like I'm doing so the camera can catch it also.
To have dealt more discreetly had done less harm, and have him dubbed him a duke with all due honor. A great leader and lord he was like to become, and better so to have been than battered to bits, beheaded by an elfman for empty pride.
All right, so here he's described, guys, as an elfman, which does not mean like a Keebler elf living in a tree making cookies, right? An elfman is any kind of supernatural being who is literally from the world of fairy, the world that is not human, not entirely human. So he's called an elfman on page 20, okay? Not human. Next one, that was page 56. We had 56. All right, Philip, as much as possible, try to project here on 56 and read beginning, starting on line 2185. This is when Sir Gawain is going to the Green Chapel and he thinks he's about to meet his death. So go ahead, Philip.
Can this be the Green Chapel? Alack, said the man. Here might the devil himself be seen, saying, maidens, at black midnight. Now by heaven it is bleak hereabouts. This prayer house is hideous, half covered with grass. Well may the green man, mauled in green, recite here his
Orisons.
in hell's own style. Now I feel it is the fiend in my 5 wits that has tempted me to this tryst to take my life.
All right, thanks, Philip. So guys, what Philip just read for us, look at some words and phrases that are jumping off the page at you. It's almost as if Sir Gawain thinks that the Green Knight is actually who, based on the language of the passage? The devil. We know this from the language where it says the devil himself saying prayers at black midnight. We have the phrase, he might recite here his prayers in hell's own style, very demonic. Now I feel it is the fiend, capital F, which is another kind of placeholder for the devil, for Satan himself. So at this point, things are spinning way out of control. He says maybe it's not some kind of supernatural being from the realm of fairy or an elf man. Maybe it's actually the great adversary of man. Maybe it is the devil himself, larger than life, supernatural, terrifying. But here's the hinge point. Here's where things begin to change. Who had page 60? 60?
Oh, me, sorry.
All right. You got it, Seth? All right, Seth, if you can read for us, starting on line 2358. For that is my belt.
For that is my belt about you, that same braided girdle. My wife it was that wore it. I know well the tale, and the count of your kisses and your conduct too, and the wooing of my wife. It was all my scheme. She made trial of a man most faultless by far, of all that ever walked over the wide earth.
All right, now this is implicit, guys. This is implied. But based on the description that he's giving about this belt, who is it that's doing the talking now? Is it the Jolly Green Giant? Is it an elf man? Is it the devil? Who is it? Husband. What's the husband's name? Lord Birdlack. So he's still someone of royalty, a member of the aristocracy, but he is clearly grounded in the human realm. It is Birdlack. He says, that was my wife. This is her garment. She was the one who made trial of you. It's been me all along. Okay. Finally, page 57. Who had that one? 57? All right, Josh. You're only going to read for us one line, and it's going to be line 2259 at the bottom. Then
the grim man in green gathers his strength.
All right, then the grim man in green gathers his strength. This is before he even explains who he is. What is different from this line, guys, from page 7, the description we got of the Green Knight? Josh. Clearly just a man. The grim man in green. What does that signify? The grim man in green. Anything? Instead of man, gear, horse, as green can be, here it's the grim man in green. What's different about that, Alex?
He's wearing green as opposed to being green.
Clearly now we can see, it's almost like an optical illusion. At the start, we couldn't see it. Now we can see it's simply a grim man, a serious man, wearing green clothing or wearing green armor. You guys get that? How many of you have ever had that experience before where when you first see something, if it's larger than life, if it's terrifying, you don't really see it the way you think you should have seen it? And now you're seeing it more clearly through traveled eyes, through experienced eyes, and you're recognizing, wait a minute, this person was just wearing green all along. You guys got that? All right, so clearly grounded in the realm of human affairs, the grim man in green. Let me tell you two things that Marie Boros says about this, and then we're going to start proceeding to the final sort of climactic conversation between the Green Knight and Sir Gawain. So Marie Boros says, this is a story, this poem is a story whose central figure, Sir Gawain, is someone very much like ourselves, as we would like to see ourselves and to have others see us. So think at the beginning of the poem, guys, how everything's going great for him. Everybody respects him. He goes out of the court wearing the pentangle. He's a paragon of chivalry. In the first part of this story, someone older than we, having dominant or authoritative status, seems to us awesome, charged with a magical aura, invulnerable, larger than life. Later, this same being comes to be seen as less awesome, less magical, no longer larger than life, in short, more like us. This change in mode of perception is linked with a change in ourselves. We learn that we are not quite all we had hoped we would be and had believed we could be. How many of you have ever let yourself down and disappointed yourself? You thought you could do so much better in handling, let's say, temptation than you actually did. You know, you're like Peter saying, Lord, I'm never gonna forsake you. I'm never gonna betray you. And then like literally the next minute, I'm betraying you and I'm forsaking you, right? It's like, man, Peter, you just don't get it. We're all like Peter in that regard, right? We're not all that we're cracked up to be. And yet, particularly when we're younger, just like we look up to our parents as authority figures, they can do no wrong. How many of you, when you were really younger, it's like death itself was a dream. Like you would never think about the reality of death because you yourself took so many risks, jumping off sheds, jumping into water, right? You know, that you probably shouldn't have jumped into. God's protecting you, God's preserving you throughout all that. But it's like you feel like you're invulnerable. You think you're impervious to pain, to suffering, to death, and then maybe somebody you know who's your age dies, and you're like, whoa. Kind of like Epic of Gilgamesh, right? Gilgamesh and Enkidu. All right, Marie Boros goes on, and she says this. After all is over, we find that we are judged benevolently, told that our trials are at an end, and assured that even though our behavior did not measure up to an absolute standard of perfection, we have been found by that higher authority not wanting but acceptable, admirable, in fact. The name that I give this paradigm is maturation or maturity, and maturity is what I see as the theme of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So you can see her argument here, guys. She sees maturity or maturation as the central theme of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Sir Gawain starts out very immature, and he becomes more spiritually mature and learns a central moral lesson by the end of the poem, which is what we are going to be exploring now. You guys got that? Okay, let's keep moving on. What is the Green Knight's final assessment of Sir Gawain's worth, and how does it differ from Sir Gawain's self-assessment? In what ways has Sir Gawain succeeded as a faithful knight? Okay, so this is asking a lot of different questions. I want you, though, to open up your books, page 60 to 61, and I'm going to be reading you guys this central exchange between the Green Knight and Sir Gawain, and then we're going to answer some of these questions up on the screen. Okay, so everyone follow along with me. Page 60 to 61, this is the most important speech in the entire poem. Intent. This is the most important speech in the entire poem. All right, page 60 to 61. The Green Knight says to Sir Gawain, and this is after he gives him the name, after he acknowledges that he took that magic token without talking about it or without telling about it. He says to Sir Gawain, as pearls to white peas more precious and prized, so is Gawain in good faith to other gay knights. So he's basically saying, you are awesome, sir. You rock good, sir. You have done everything, almost everything right. You are like a pearl in comparison to just a white pea. Yet you lack, sir, a little in loyalty there. But the cause was not cunning, nor courtship either. It wasn't duplicity for the sake of duplicity. It wasn't sexual kind of liaisons. But that you loved your own life, the less than to blame. And he basically exonerates him. He atones for it right then and there. He's like, you're not that bad. You're forgiven. The other stout knight, that is Sir Gawain, in a study stood a long while, so gripped with grim rage that his great heart shook. All the blood of his body burned in his face as he shrank back in shame from the man's sharp speech. The first words that fell from the fair knight's lips, cursed be a cowardly and covetous heart. In you is villainy and vice and virtue laid low. Then he grasps the green girdle, lets go the knot, hands it over in haste, and hotly he says, behold there my falsehood, ill hap betided. Your cut taught me cowardice, care for my life, and coveting came after, contrary both to largesse and loyalty belonging to knights. Now am I faulty and false, that fearful was ever of disloyalty and lies, bad luck to them both, and greed. I confess, knight, in this place, my faults are grave indeed. Let me gain back your good grace, and hereafter I shall take heed. So that's the speech that Sir Gawain gives. Then the other, that is the Green Knight, laughed aloud, and lightly he said, such harm as I have had, I hold it quite healed. You are so fully confessed, your failings made known, and bear the plain penance of the point of my blade. I hold you, Sir Gawain, polished as a pearl, as pure and as bright as you had lived free of fault since first you were born. And I give you, sir, this girdle that is gold-hemmed and green as my garments, that Gawain, you may be mindful of this meeting when you mingle in throng with nobles of renown, and known by this token, how it chanced at the Green Chapel to chivalrous knights. Okay? So if we want to sum this up, guys, who thinks better of Sir Gawain, the Green Knight or Sir Gawain? Clearly the Green Knight thinks better of Sir Gawain. So the first thing that we're going to look at, for the sake of time, is we're going to look at the various ways in which Sir Gawain actually succeeded and did not mess up. He actually succeeded as a faithful knight here. Okay? First thing. The Green Knight holds Gawain as essentially pure. We have the language, almost religious language here of justification. You guys have heard the definition of justification before, just as if you've never sinned. Basically, that's what he's saying to Sir Gawain. He says, guess what, Gawain? I hold you as polished as a pearl, as pure and as bright as if you had lived free of fault, free of sin, since first you were born. I do not see you essentially as sinful. I don't see that as your core identity. I see you as holy. I see you as righteous. I see you as pure. But I see you as someone who messed up. You guys understand that? That's the first thing that we learn about the assessment of the Green Knight regarding Sir Gawain. Secondly, after Sir Gawain messes up, he is so quick to confess. In that passage I read you, he immediately confesses. How many of you have ever been caught in a sin? How many of you have ever been caught in doing something you should not have done, said something you should not have said, somebody catches you on it, And almost immediately, what is our knee-jerk response usually? What do we do sometimes? When someone catches us in it? It wasn't me, right? You try to rationalize it, you try to justify it, you try to exonerate yourself, you try to basically shove it under the carpet and say, I think you're mistaking what it is that I said or did. That didn't actually happen. We are so endlessly self-justifying, right? Rationalizing. Sir Gawain, how many of you guys feel really impressed with Sir Gawain that he immediately confesses? That shows a lot of moral fortitude, that shows a lot of moral strength. So the Green Knight sees that. Sir Gawain does not see that in himself. So he gives him props. He's like, you are so quick to confess. That's awesome, Sir Gawain. Thirdly, he actually shows up and resists the temptation to flee. On page 54, the servant of Bertilac says to him, he gives him the last temptation. And he says to him, Sir Gawain, I hate the fact that you're going to your own death, your certain death. He says, I will let you go right now, and it'll just be between the two of us. I will never reveal to a living soul that you actually ran away out of fear. Go for it. Do it, right? And Sir Gawain's response is, even if just the two of us knew, it would cripple me for the rest of my life. I would have that guilty conscience for the rest of my life. So no, I'm going to demonstrate my essentially honorable nature by meeting the Green Knight as I promised to do. How many of you guys hold him in high regard for doing that? Pretty amazing, right? That he would choose to do that. I mean, nobody knew. This was in the days before surveillance or video cameras, right? And he did it anyway. He did it because he's like, integrity is who you are when no one else is watching. You guys heard that expression before? Integrity is who you are when no one else is watching. Speaking of integrity, when no one else is watching, he shows courage in the face of adversity. Anytime he's faced with adversity, even if it's just him and the Green Knight, he is going to show courage because he realizes that it's his identity on the line, right? It's his name which is on the line. Connected to that, he resists the sexual advances of Bertilac's lady. How many men in the room would have enough moral fortitude when they knew that nobody else was watching to be able to resist over and over and over again the advances of a beautiful woman coming into his bedroom every single morning wearing not much, right? A beautiful woman, beautiful model. It would be very difficult to turn down. And nobody's watching, there's no cameras. But he continues to turn her down. He continues to act honorably and to resist sexual temptation. He remains essentially pure, which is awesome, right? Very, very cool, and we give Sir Gawain real props. However, how does Sir Gawain see himself? Give me some words, guys, for how Sir Gawain views himself at this point. For messing up. Give me some words. Alex?
Deflated.
Okay, he feels deflated. Give me some other words. How does he see himself? What are some words he uses to describe himself, phrases to describe himself? He is a pure, classic, textbook example of a perfectionist, a moral perfectionist, right? He messes up. What does he call himself? What kind of words does he use to describe himself? What's that? Yeah, I'm a failure. I'm an absolute failure. He's deflated. What other thoughts, Michelle?
He's a coward.
I'm a coward. I'm a coward. I'm a failure. I'm a screw up. Anything else? Other ways, essentially, that he's describing himself? How about this? I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve grace. I don't deserve second chances. I'm miserable. I'm no good. I'm lousy. I'm a horrible, no good, awful person. You guys get the idea, right? How many of you have ever fallen into that trap? How many of you guys do that sometimes with yourself? You get in that rut. You're like, I keep committing the same sin, let's say, over and over again. I'm miserable. I'm evil. I'm the worst person ever born. Nobody could ever forgive me. Christ could never love me, right? And so we get in that rut, particularly moral perfectionists. Particularly people whose moral record is basically essentially built on their own standards of righteousness, the things that they do. And you're starting to see now, guys, why this poem is so beautifully human, poignantly human, but profoundly religious as well. Let's move on. Here's what Sir Gawain thinks of himself, just to sum it up. He sees himself as cowardly, disloyal, false, traitorous, way too covetous of his own life. He feels he's committed the unpardonable sin. He does not deserve to be given a second chance. He sees himself as Ser Cepoletto is described by the narrator. Why do I waste any words on him? He was perhaps the worst man ever born. That's how he sees himself. Have we ever fallen into that trap of thinking that of ourselves? Why do I even waste any words on myself? I'm the worst person ever born. I'm the worst man ever born. I'm the worst woman ever born. I'm horrible, rotten to the core, right? That's how he sees himself, but he's got to learn a central lesson. essential lessons. All right, as you guys are writing this down, I realize I'm kind of sprinting through this. It's only 7:40 though, Maddie, so we're doing well so far. Any questions so far though? Any questions about what's going on or where we're moving, heading with poem? Because I'm about to get my preach on. It's about to get awesome. All right, here we go. All right. So guys, how has Sir Gawain's encounter with the Green Knight been for his own good all along, do we discover towards the very end? Okay, and we're just going to sort of walk our way through some of these passages, some of these encounters. So the first one, you're going to see kind of the points themselves are going to come up on the screen here at the same time that we're going to be reading the passages. So page 12. Everyone turn to page 12, and for the sake of time, I'll read these. When the Green Knight issues his challenge, who is it that initially is going to fight the Green Knight? Do you remember?
Arthur.
It's going to be King Arthur. And then Sir Gawain interposes himself and says, my lord, it's kind of like the ancient Germanic Scandinavian tradition too. He says, I'm one of your thanes, I'm one of your knights. You are not supposed to risk your own life in fighting the Green Knight. I'll do it for you. And here's what he says. Here's the speech that he gives. Starting on line 354, middle of page 12. He says, King Arthur, I am the weakest, well I know, and of wit feeblest, and the loss of my life would be least of any. That I have you for uncle is my only praise. My body, but for your blood, is barren of worth, utterly barren of worth. Now, what kind of words is Sir Gawain using to describe himself here? What kind of language, what kind of rhetoric is he employing? I am weakest, of wit the feeblest, loss of my life means nothing at all. The only thing that's good about me is that I have the same blood as you. What do we call that kind of language, that kind of rhetoric about himself? Someone say it?
Derogatory.
Yeah, it's very derogatory. Anyone want to add to that?
Self-deprecating.
It's very self-deprecating. He's lowering himself. It's excessive humility, excessive courtesy. But have you ever heard anyone talk like this about themselves? Anyone? Like, man, I am, okay, let's say this. Somebody who's very accomplished, actually. Somebody who's an accomplished speaker, somebody who's an accomplished athlete, somebody who basically knows that they're pretty attractive to other people, right? In so many ways, socially, physically, emotionally, all that, right? And they go to people constantly and say, I'm having a bad hair day today, right? Even though maybe they're having an awesome hair day, right? I'm having a horrible hair day today, and I just took that test, and I'm sure I just failed it. Even though you know you spent like 3 or 4 hours studying for that test, and you felt you did pretty well on that test, what you say to people is, I did horribly on that test, I'm so awful. So basically you're saying to other people, I'm not smart, I'm not attractive, I'm not funny. What are you hoping that other people will say in response? Oh, stop it. You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. You're the smartest person I've ever seen. You're the funniest person ever. And what do you say in response? Come on, guys. Oh, stop it. Stop it. Keep it coming. Keep it coming, right? What kind of humility do we call this, guys? Potentially false humility. Potentially false humility. What kind of people exercise false humility on a pretty regular basis? Sorry to step on any toes, guys. I was kind of like this myself for a long time. What kind of people? They're people who are insecure. People who are basically basing their own self-worth on what? The stuff that they do. Their accomplishments, their appearance, their intellect, whatever. And some people are still like that, right? I'm still like that a little bit sometimes too, because we long for these words of affirmation, for people to build us up and say we're actually really awesome so that we don't feel bad about ourselves. So it's almost at this point, guys, like Sir Gawain is fishing for compliments. Fishing for compliments from the court, saying, no, are you kidding me? What are you saying about yourself? And he says, yeah. He says, I'm the weakest. No, you're the strongest. Oh, I'm of wit the feeblest. Are you kidding me? You are so witty. You're amazing. The loss of my life would be least of any. No, the loss of your life would be devastating for this court. He longs for people to tell him that. You guys get that? So that's the first thing that we get, that Sir Gawain might need some help. At the start, he's not as perfect as he's cracked up to be. Secondly, page 20. This could be someone who's already read tonight, guys, but can someone else read for me at page 20? It's a passage that we've already read, but we're going to look at it from a slightly different angle. So I'm going to read page 20. Short passage, very short passage. All right, Ashley? And I think, Ian, you might have read this passage a little bit earlier. So start on line 677, Ashley. To have dealt.
To have dealt more discreetly had done him less harm. To have dubbed him a duke with all due honor. A great leader and lord he was like to become, and better so to have been than battered to bits. Beheaded by an elf man for pride and empty.
Great. Okay, so stop there, Ashley. Guys, in that last line, the storyteller, the poet, is telling us Sir Gawain's motivation for doing what he did here. He's coming right out and telling us. Why did Sir Gawain choose to take on the Green Knight and challenge him? Empty pride. Some scholars say he actually went above and beyond the requirements set by the Green Knight. The Green Knight just says, let's each take a swing at each other. He didn't say, let's deal like a death-dealing, crippling blow by beheading the other person. He just says, take a swing at me, I take a swing at you. He went over the top to try to impress people, and now he's going to have to pay for it, according to the storyteller. To have dealt more discreetly had done less harm. He could have been a duke, he could have grown up, he could have had a long life, but no, now he's going to have to meet his own mortality perhaps because of empty pride. Pride seems to be a pretty significant theme in the poem. The pride of the court, the pride of Sir Gawain. Let's keep moving on. Number 19, page 19. We have the description of the pentangle that he wears on his shield. When he leaves the court, this is his signifying token. This is what he's known by, this pentangle. And 2 whole pages, the poet goes on and on and on about what the pentangle represents. And finally concludes by saying, starting on line 631, and well may he wear it on his worthy arms. Forever faithful, fivefold in fivefold fashion, was Gawain in good works, as gold unalloyed, devoid of all villainy, with virtues adorned in sight. So he's wearing this pentangle, guys. He's sporting this pentangle. It's a symbol of perfection. What do you think that could lead to in terms of his spiritual mindset, his social mindset, his psychological mindset, if he bears this token around all the time? In terms of his mental state, what could that lead him to? What could that lead him to believe?
Hubris.
Total hubris. What could he maybe start believing about himself? I am perfect. Just like this pentangle is perfect, I believe my own press, and I believe that I myself am perfect. I believe that I can go out into the world, and all the slings and arrows that the world wants to throw at me, I can take it, and I can resist it. It's like I can win. I can make Camelot great again, right? I can do anything possible, and nothing can assail me. Nothing can hurt me. That's a pretty prideful attitude, right? This pentangle. All right, finally, the green girdle. All right, how many of you, let me just ask this, guys, and I'm not, again, accusing anybody, but how many wear a cross on your neck on a pretty regular basis? Nice. Anyone wear a cross? All right. What is the cross a symbol of when we wear a cross on our necks? Help me, people. Anybody? Right, Jesus. All right. When in doubt, say Jesus. All right. Anything in particular about Jesus when we wear the cross? Because really, the cross is a horrible form of torture and execution, right? Alex?
Well, because our cross, he's not on the cross.
He's not on the cross. So it's the empty cross. So it's symbolic of Christ's love for us, the atonement, right? How many of you have ever seen people who wear crosses, however, who you think to yourself, why are those people wearing crosses and doing what it is that they're doing or saying what it is that they're saying? You know what I'm talking about? Because potentially they're hypocrites. Or let's say that they've got the ichthus, the fish bumper sticker, or something from like Thomas Road or whatever, not Thomas Road, not I but Christ, right? Isn't that the bumper sticker? Pretty much any kind of Christian insignia. It's like I am publicly defining myself or proclaiming myself as a believer. And then you think to yourself, I'm never going to sin. And then 1 John, 2 John, 3 John is saying, if we say we have no sin, we're liars, right? Because clearly we're going to sin. And yet sometimes people start believing their own presses. And sometimes people think that wearing the cross means that we ourselves are also always going to do perfect things and never going to sin. So we got a pretty high standard that we got to live up to. It's just scary sometimes, right? Page 61, we have a description of this green girdle, which is the replacement symbol that Sir Gawain goes back to the court with, and it's no longer a pentangle, it's no longer a cross. Now it's a green girdle, which a girdle is to be worn under your garments. It's an undergarment, right? It's basically something that a woman would wear under her clothing. He's wearing like a bra, let's say, right? Or he's wearing panties or something like that on his I don't like that word, by the way. He's wearing it on his shoulder, and it's like, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous, and it's kind of shaming, right? This is where it gets so beautiful, guys. You're thinking to yourself, how is this going to get beautiful? This is so strange and weird right now. Listen to what the Green Knight says, okay? Bottom of page 61. But your girdle, God love you, I gladly, or this is Sir Gawain saying, by the way, to the Green Knight, but your girdle, God love you, I gladly shall take and be pleased to possess, not for the pure gold, nor the bright belt itself, nor the beauteous pendants, nor for wealth, nor worldly state, nor workmanship fine, but a sign of excess it shall seem oftentimes when I ride in renown, and remember with shame the faults and the frailty of the flesh perverse, how its tenderness entices the foul taint of sin, and so when praise and high prowess have pleased my heart, a look at this lovelace will lower my pride. When I look at this ridiculous undergarment on my shoulder, anytime I'm tempted to feel awesome about myself, or I have my head get a little bit too inflated, I look at that and I'm like, all right, I'm not that great. I'm not that awesome. I mess up. Okay, so do you guys get that? Everyone get what's going on there? Here's what I equate this to. Here's how I bring it back to us in our day-to-day lives here at Liberty University. How many of you are part of like an accountability group or a small group? Anyone? Accountability group, small group, hopefully a lot of you guys are. When you first entered this small group or this accountability group, how many of you found it kind of difficult to be open with people about things that you were struggling with? Things that you sin, that you committed maybe habitually, right? Things that you needed help with. Why is it? Why do we feel initially very standoffish about it? We're silent. We don't want to talk about that with our small group or accountability group. Give me some reasons why, guys. Alex?
Who are they going to tell?
Okay, we're afraid that they're going to start gossiping, maybe, right? Telling people, and we're going to lose our reputation in some ways. What else? Why do we not talk about these kind of things? Cassie?
Afraid that they'll judge you.
You're afraid that they're going to judge you, right? It's like, I don't need that. I don't need judgment. What else? Other fears that we might have. Seth?
I think you're the only one.
Maybe you feel you're the only one until you reveal it, and they're like, oh, me too, me too, me too. What? Are you kidding me? Anything else? What do we fear? What are we really afraid of?
That they look at us differently.
We're afraid that they're going to look at us differently. Like every time they see us from here on out, they're going to see maybe that sin, and they're not going to really see us, right? Anything else? Why don't we do it? Why aren't we transparent with one another? Why aren't we vulnerable with one another? Yeah, Marlon.
I think we like to look like we're okay, and we also like to believe that we're okay.
Yeah, excellent. We want to look like we're okay. We want to believe ourselves that we're okay. Basically, what we want to believe, which is totally false, which is a sin, which is a falsehood from the pit of hell. We want to believe that we are entirely self-sufficient and we actually don't need a savior. You get that? It's like, oh, we say it, right? At campus church, or we say it at church, and in our small groups, so we say that we need a savior. We say that we believe that Jesus is Savior and Lord, but we don't live it. We live like we are self-sufficient unto ourselves, and we can just do it on our own, right? We can totally do it on our own. We don't need anyone to rescue us. We're good. Got it? So here's what I would encourage you guys to do as it relates to this idea of vulnerability, transparency, and the green girdle. How do we translate the idea of the green girdle to today's day and age? I would say we translate it to being vulnerable and transparent with one another. So let's imagine that before the final exam, we all get together and we make these t-shirts, okay? Let's not actually do this, but maybe we can do this. All right, we make these t-shirts, and on the t-shirts, like in Sharpie marker or something, so we can wear it around Liberty, we would say something like, hi, my name is Steve, and I struggle with anxiety, but God loves me and redeemed me. Right? Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I really struggle with gossip. I like to talk about other people, right? Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I struggle with this, I struggle with that. That's basically like the green girdle attitude, right? You notice that when he comes back to the court wearing the green girdle, how do the people at Camelot respond? He's afraid of rejection. He's afraid that they're going to look at him differently. He's afraid that his reputation is going to be lowered in their eyes. How do they respond? Do you remember? Anyone recall? Abigail?
They start wearing.
They all start wearing the green girdle. They're basically looking at him and they're like, oh, you too? You mess up too? What a relief. I thought that you were perfect, right? You mess up too. Let's help each other not mess up, right? So they all wear the girdle, and it ends with laughter. It ends with mirth. It ends with joy, where they're like, man, we don't have to be perfect because we're forgiven. Isn't that cool? Isn't that really awesome? I love the message of that of the story. How many of you have ever read Tim Keller before? You guys know about Tim Keller? Okay, Tim Keller's got a great book called The Prodigal God, where he really takes to task the older brother syndrome in the story of the prodigal son, because a lot of us, as like conservative, maybe fundamentalist, evangelical Christians, we're afflicted with the older brother syndrome, meaning we're so self-righteous, we look down our nose at other people, and we think that we can do it perfectly, whereas all these other screw-ups can't do it perfectly. right? He says, that is so dangerous. He said, I once had a theology professor, a seminary professor, who said that it was not his sin, in so many words, that was keeping the older brother from the feast of salvation that the father was offering. It was this is the words of the seminary professor, guys, it was his damnable good works. It was his damnable good works, which were literally keeping him from the feast of salvation. He did not recognize that his own awesomeness, his own good works, were nothing more than filthy rags in the sight of a holy God. Isn't that pretty cool? So it's this idea of the green girdle that we wear. All right. There it is, Tim Keller quote. Pride in our own accomplishments, our own deeds, our own works or acts of service, that's just holding on to our own filthy rags instead of accepting Christ's righteousness, which is never earned. That's what's so beautiful about the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Now, as we start to wrap up, sorry to single you out, Maddie, again, but we're about to wrap up here. It's going to be pretty amazing. All right. Oh, you guys are probably still writing it down, right? Okay. Guys, if you are a hero like Sir Gawain, okay, basically, according to A.C. Spearing, who's a professor at the University of Virginia, he's a medievalist scholar. He's written a lot on medieval works of literature and on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in particular. He says, if you're a hero like Sir Gawain, if you're a hero like Gilgamesh, if you're a hero like Odysseus or Aeneas, he says one of the most fatal things for a hero, for the heroic aspiration, is first of all to endure laughter. To be laughed at, that would be pretty crippling, and that's exactly what happens at the end of the story. There's laughter when Sir Gawain comes back wearing an undergarment. But secondly, he says it is the extension of forgiveness on the part of another. So if you're a hero and somebody extends forgiveness to you, that is, somebody forgives you for something, that is really crippling to the heroic aspirations. Why do you think that's the case? If somebody forgives you, why is that so crippling? At least for the classical hero. For an Odysseus and Aeneas and Gilgamesh. Josh? It means you did something wrong, and it means anything else. I was about to add that. Anything else that it means. Think about it, guys. Critically think through this. Why is forgiveness so crippling to the heroic aspiration? It means you did something wrong. What else? You mad? Yes, you are in debt now to somebody else, and it's almost like somebody else has you in their power or in their sway. If you're a classical hero, you want to be powerful over all comers, right? Over all circumstances. You don't want to be in anybody's debt. But to have to need to be forgiven, you're in somebody else's debt, somebody else's power, control, and that's a scary, threatening thing. How many of you, after we've been talking about this, see the Green Knight as almost a stand-in for Jesus in this story? You see him acting a little bit like Jesus? Anyone? Only me? In the language that he's using, this idea, I hold you as polished as a pearl, I forgive you, Sir Gawain, don't beat yourself up too hard. Alex?
Like, was he intending to show this with King Arthur at first? Because he was intentionally challenging King Arthur at first.
Who was?
The Green Knight. So
right.
Was he trying to do this with Arthur at first, and then Gawain just showed up and he was like, oh, okay, I'll do it on Gawain. Cool.
Yeah, because we remember, guys, that the court itself was very prideful. This was the passage we looked at with Morgan Le Fay, where it says, in order to frighten the fair queen to death, but also to assay the court's pride. She'd heard rumors of the court's pride, and so she's like, I'm going to take them to task. I'm going to try to lower their pride a little bit. So it could have been anyone. It ends up being Gawain, who is like the greatest of them all. Yeah, Mark?
So Morgan's kind of painted like this horrible character.
Right.
But is she actually a moral character by teaching women pride?
Yeah. She's an instrument in the hands, I would say, of goodness and righteousness. Maybe she herself is a bad person, but she's being used to accomplish some really good things for the court. Pretty cool, right? What you meant for evil, God meant for good, that whole idea. All right, so here's the quote that I was referencing, guys, where A.C. Spearing says, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight captures the valiant, but eventually hopeless struggle against a power beyond the natural, which tests men, searches out their imperfections, and at last, most devastating of all to the heroic aspiration, forgives them. Says that's what makes Sir Gawain the Green Knight such an enduring, such a powerful poem,